9 years have passed since Britain made a big choice to leave the European Union. Today, the country is facing serious economic challenges. It is clear that Brexit has cost a lot. Each British household has lost about £2,000. This money shows less income and slower economic growth. This sad situation points to a story of national self-sabotage, where the country harmed its own future. Many people now feel regret about their vote. This feeling has a name: Bregret. It means voters are sorry for their decision. This regret is now very common across the UK. But there is one very important, surprising reason why this feeling became so widespread. We will find out what it is later. In 2016, many people had a bright vision for Britain outside the EU. They believed in more control, more money, and a better future. Yet looking at 2025, the real situation is far from what was promised. The gap between the hopeful vision and today's reality is very wide. To truly understand Britain's problems and the current crisis, we must look at something deeper. We need to uncover a hidden way of thinking among British people. This way of thinking started many years ago, even back to World War II. This important trait will be explained in detail in the next chapter. This introduction finishes with a strong thought. The true cost of Brexit is not just money. Britain has lost something much more valuable than any amount of money. This loss, sadly, is forever. A very different island. France and Germany saw the European project as a way to stop future wars. After terrible conflicts, they wanted lasting peace. So working together in Europe was a deep, important goal for them. But Britain had a different view. Britain joined Europe mainly for business, to be part of a large market. For Britain, it was a practical deal, not a project for peace. This difference was very important and created a misunderstanding that lasted for many years. Britain is an island nation. This made people feel apart from the rest of Europe. Also, Britain had a powerful empire in the past. This history gave many people a sense that Britain was a global leader. They believed Britain could act on its own without needing too many ties to Europe. This island way of thinking and the memory of its empire shaped Britain's identity. A surprising fact is that Britain's experience in World War II played a hidden role. Britain was never conquered. Many felt great pride in this. Deep down, some thought, "We won the war. Why should we now take orders from European countries, some of whom were occupied or needed our help?" This feeling quietly drove the idea that being independent was best, and it later affected how Britain viewed trade with Europe. For 30 years, British news reports often shared many strange stories about the EU. They spoke of absurd rules from Brussels, like laws about the shape of bananas or the power of electric kettles. These stories often stretched the truth. Why did the media tell these tales? They made the EU seem foolish and annoying. These small, repeated myths created a big sense of anger among people. This anger helped to cause a huge political problem in Britain. All these feelings and stories created a powerful mix. But what would truly start the big change? In 2004, the British Prime Minister, Tony Blair, made a key decision. It seemed like a small choice at the time, but this choice would become an invisible trigger. It set the stage for much bigger chaos and problems that would come years later. 3. The roots of anger. The years from 2000 to 2015 saw anger grow across Britain. A main event was 2004, when the European Union welcomed 10 new countries. Most older EU nations, like France and Germany, limited how many workers could move freely from these new countries for up to 7 years. They wanted to control the flow, but the UK government, under Tony Blair, chose not to. They expected only a small number of people to come. Instead, over 1 million people arrived from these new countries in just 10 years. This unique UK decision brought big changes to many towns and cities. For the British economy, these new workers were helpful. They filled jobs and boosted growth. Yet in some working-class communities, especially in the North, people felt worried. They saw rapid change, and their own wages did not improve. They felt this new migration threatened their jobs and daily lives. This feeling of being left behind led to deep anger. Then came the 2008 global financial crisis. It was a worldwide problem, but it hurt Britain badly. The government spent much money to save banks, then cut public services for years, a policy called austerity. Wages for many people stopped growing, making life harder. People wanted someone to blame for their worsening situation. The European Union became a simple target for this anger. People felt they had lost control. Their frustration built a strong wave for new political ideas. This economic struggle was just the beginning. The biggest shock, a true betrayal, as you will discover in Chapter 7, was still ahead. On the eve of a historic vote, the public was ready for change, unaware they were about to be sold a huge lie about £350 million a week. 4. The big promises. In 2016, Britain faced a big choice: stay in the European Union or leave. The Leave the campaign made many promises to convince voters. These promises had 3 main ideas: sovereignty, money, and borders. First, they talked about sovereignty. This meant Britain would take back control of its own laws and government. They said no more rules from Brussels. British politicians would make all the decisions for Britain. Many people felt distant institutions made choices for them, so the idea of reclaiming control felt good. The campaign's words were simple and powerful. Take back control. Worked well because it was vague. The campaign did not explain what control meant exactly. Different people could imagine it in their own ways. Some thought it meant more power for local towns. Others believed it meant more national pride. This unclear promise helped to unite many different types of voters who had various reasons for their anger. Second, the campaign promised more money for the NHS, Britain's health service. They famously put a huge claim on a bus. "We send the EU £350 million a week. Let's fund our NHS instead." This number was much higher than the actual money Britain sent to the EU, but it made many people think Britain would have more money for hospitals. This promise was very appealing, and many people believed it deeply. Third, they promised to control borders better and reduce the number of people coming into the country. One big fear story was about Turkey joining the EU. The campaign strongly suggested that this would mean 77 million Turkish citizens could move to the UK. This was not true. Turkey was not close to joining. This terrifying lie, now largely forgotten, made many voters afraid and helped change the vote. Libertarians, who wanted to leave the EU, had a special dream for Britain's economy. They called it Singapore-on-Thames. They imagined Britain as a country with very low taxes and few rules, like Singapore. They believed this would attract many global businesses and create wealth. This dream, however, was doomed to fail from the start. Finally, the day of the vote came. Many people voted to leave the European Union. The Leave campaign won. But after the celebrations, a new problem started. The winners had no real plan for what to do next or how to make their big promises real. This lack of a plan would cause many difficulties, especially in talks with the EU. 5. The hard reality. After the Leave vote in 2016, a hard truth soon became clear. There was no detailed plan for what Brexit would look like. The next 4 years were filled with difficult talks and political confusion. One of the biggest problems was the border in Northern Ireland. Before Brexit, there was an open, invisible border between Northern Ireland, part of the UK, and the Republic of Ireland, part of the EU. This open border was a key part of the peace agreement from 1998. However, the UK wanted to leave the EU's single market and customs union. This meant there had to be checks on goods moving between the UK and the EU. But putting a hard border with customs posts on the island of Ireland would break the peace. So the UK government faced an impossible triangle. It wanted no hard border on the island of Ireland, no border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK, and to leave the EU's market. This issue was so difficult that it led to the downfall of 2 prime ministers. Eventually, the UK chose a hard Brexit. This meant it would leave the EU's single market and customs union completely. The aim was to gain full control over laws and trade. But this decision had big costs. Political leaders had said that leaving the EU would mean cutting red tape and less bureaucracy. However, the reality was the opposite. For British businesses, especially those selling goods to Europe, this choice created mountains of new paperwork. Every truck that wanted to deliver goods to Europe now needed complex customs declarations. Companies had to fill out forms about where their products came from. Food items like fresh fish or meat needed new health and safety certificates to cross the border. These extra steps caused long delays at ports and added high costs for businesses. This new system of trade barriers made moving goods much harder and more expensive. The costs of transport, new checks, and paperwork all added up. This meant that many products, especially food imported from Europe, became more expensive for people to buy. This rise in prices was like a hidden tax that would soon affect everyone, and its full impact would be seen in future chapters. At the end of 2020, a new trade deal was signed with the EU called the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. This deal officially ended the free movement of people. For many British exporters, however, this agreement felt like a suicide note. It meant their easy, smooth trade with Europe was gone. They now faced big obstacles, new costs, and a much harder way to sell their goods. The economic effects of this change were immediate and left many people very worried about the future of British trade. 6. Lost money and trade. The new trade deal, signed in 2020, quickly showed its true colors. Many British businesses found it much harder to sell their products to countries in Europe. New paperwork, customs checks, and different rules made trade slow and expensive. This led to big losses in money and jobs. To understand why, we can look at something called the gravity model of trade. It's a simple idea. Countries trade more with their close neighbors. It's easier and cheaper to send goods across a short distance than across a long one. For example, sending a box from London to Paris costs much less than sending it to Los Angeles. This is why, before Brexit, about half of Britain's trade was with the European Union. No matter the politics, trading with France or Germany will always be easier and cheaper than trading from faraway Australia. The fishing industry is a clear example of this problem. The Leave campaign promised that Brexit would save British fishing. Fishermen were told they would take back control of their waters and sell more fish. But the opposite happened. British fish, a luxury product, was mostly sold to Europe. After the new rules, exporting fish became very difficult. New customs forms and health papers meant long delays. This caused exports to Europe to drop sharply, by 83% in the first year alone. Many fishing businesses struggled or failed. Remember the idea of Singapore on Thames from Chapter 4? This was the dream of Britain becoming a global tech hub with few rules and low taxes, like Singapore. The plan was to attract big businesses and become a world leader in new technology. But this dream did not come true. The world of global trade was changing. Big countries like the United States and China began to focus more on their own industries and tech sectors. They became more protective of their markets. This made it harder for Britain to find its own way in the global tech race. Britain was squeezed between the big trading blocs, unable to fully compete. All these changes, from new trade rules to harder global competition, had a huge cost for the country. Experts now talk about the missing 4% of GDP. This means Britain's total economic output has grown 4% less than it should have. This money vanished into higher costs for businesses, fewer products sold to other countries, and slower growth in people's wages. It's money that British households would have had. But there was one promise that many people who voted to leave held most tightly. This was the promise to take back control of Britain's borders and reduce immigration. Many believed leaving the EU would mean fewer people coming to live and work in the UK. However, the story of what actually happened with immigration after Brexit holds the biggest and most surprising betrayal of all. Who comes to Britain? Many people voted for Brexit because they wanted to control who came to Britain. They believed leaving the European Union would mean fewer people coming to live and work in the country. This was a main promise of the Leave campaign in 2016. However, the reality after Brexit has been very different from what was expected. The opposite happened. In 2023, Britain saw the highest number of people coming to live there in its recorded history. Around 1.2 million more people moved to Britain than left. This huge number is much higher than before Brexit, even higher than the years when EU workers could come freely. This was a very unexpected result for many who voted for Brexit, as their goal was to reduce the overall number of new arrivals. Before Brexit, many workers came from EU countries, especially from Eastern Europe, to fill jobs in Britain. After Britain left the EU, it became harder for these workers to enter the UK because of new rules, so fewer people came from Europe. But Britain still needed workers for many important jobs across the country. Key sectors like healthcare, social care, farming, and hotels faced severe staff shortages. Without workers, these essential services and industries struggled. To fill these urgent job openings and help the economy, the British government had to invite workers from other parts of the world. New visa routes were created for people from non-EU countries. As a result, many more people started coming from places like India, China, and the Philippines. This represents a big change in where Britain's new residents come from, shifting from European neighbors to more distant nations. This demographic change will certainly shape Britain's society and its future identity in new ways. The new immigration system, based on points, aimed to control who came by prioritizing skilled workers. However, it also meant that the overall number of people entering the country did not go down. In fact, it rose significantly. So, while a main reason for Brexit was to take back control of borders and reduce immigration, the result was the opposite. Many people feel that the system is now more out of control than ever before. This unexpected turn has created a deep sense of national exhaustion and confusion. The promise of fewer migrants was not kept, leaving many to wonder about the true meaning of control and who now truly comes to Britain. The future path. 9 years after the big vote, many people in Britain feel a great sadness.
This feeling is often called Bregret, a regret for the decision made. The promises about leaving the European Union did not come true for most. People thought leaving would bring more money and full control over borders. Instead, the country has lost money, about £2,000 for each family on average. Also, more people are coming to Britain than ever before, even though they come from different parts of the world now. This has left many voters feeling disappointed and confused. Today, only 13% of British people think Brexit was a success. This is a very small number, showing how much opinions have changed. Most people now believe Britain should trade more closely with its European neighbors again, which is different from what was promised. The country now faces a big and difficult question. What path should it take for the future? There are three main ways forward. The first way is to rejoin or become much closer to Europe again. This means fixing the old ties and perhaps even trying to become part of the European Union once more. But this would be a very hard thing to do. Many people might not agree with such a big change, and the countries in Europe might not welcome Britain back easily after all that has happened. The second way is to realign. This means Britain could try to become a special place for new technology and business, like a London Silicon Valley.
It would mean making different rules from Europe to attract companies, and maybe working very closely with countries like the United States. This path hopes for new global trade deals and a focus on innovation. However, it also has its own risks and challenges, as trading with close European neighbors is still very important for the economy. The third way is to decline, or simply keep going as things are now. This means accepting the problems of less trade with Europe and a confusing new immigration system. It means hoping things will get better without making big, difficult changes. But many feel this current path is not working well and only leads to more trouble. It is always hard for a country to say it made a mistake. Britain has already paid a high price for the changes it has made. Now, finding a clear and helpful new direction is the biggest job for the country in the next 10 years. It is a time for honest talks about what is truly best for the future of Britain. What do you think is the best path for Britain to take now?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.